Hi, I'm Dongsheng. Welcome to Digging into China, where we explore China in depth to reveal unique perspectives. The U.S. China trade conflict erupted on April 9th, with tariffs escalating to 145%. By now, the strategies and intentions of both nations are clear, warranting a thorough analysis. In my view, this confrontation arose from a series of unintended missteps. Both sides have made significant strategic errors. Yet, these misjudgments have produced starkly different outcomes. To state the conclusion upfront, America's misjudgment of China precipitated this conflict earlier than anticipated. Beyond that, the U.S. faces no significant hardship. Indeed, this era has yielded a remarkably favorable situation for the United States. Conversely, China's misjudgment of the U.S. has accelerated the moment when its economy faces a brittle collapse. For the Chinese government, the consequences are intolerable. Its long-planned model of sweeping social control has not had time to be fully implemented. Other measures to counter economic declines are, at this moment, entirely ineffective and impossible to deploy. Let us begin with the U.S. perspective. The Trump administration's primary error was overestimating China's strength. On the surface, China's military prowess appears formidable. Annually, it launches more warships than the combined naval fleets of all European nations. The People's Liberation Army continually upgrades its arsenal, with a standard army brigade firepower now surpassing that of the U.S. military. Lunar missions are launched in rapid succession, and Mars exploration is well underway. In renewable energy, breakthroughs in solar power and electric vehicles created an impression of vibrant progress. Meanwhile, China pursues aggressive money diplomacy in Africa and Latin America, providing substantial financial aid to secure their support on a global stage. These surface indicators suggest an unassailable Chinese economy. An economic showdown with the U.S. at this juncture might seem destined to result in mutual devastation. China appears unlikely to falter easily and could, before succumbing to depression, pull the U.S. into an inflationary spiral, inflicting significant hardship on Americans. Yet, what is the true state of China's economy? Ordinary Chinese citizens have been drained by a 20-year real estate bubble, with the average household now burdened by a net debt of 200,000 yuan. Savings are depleted, and the purchasing power is virtually non-existent. The top 2% of the red elite controls 82% of the nation's wealth, creating an unprecedented level of inequality. Compounding this, China lacks a robust social welfare system. Resources are disproportionately allocated to the 90 million public servants, ensuring their lavish lifestyles and constant indulgence. The remaining 1.3 billion citizens receive no meaningful health care or retirement support. To reduce welfare obligations, the government introduced a 2024 policy, delaying retirement by 5 years for all working-class individuals. Simultaneously, to maintain public servants' loyalty, fund their generous benefits, and sustain infrastructure projects that enable corruption. The Chinese government is trapped in a deficit spiral, annual fiscal deficits exceeding 10 trillion yuan and continue to grow rapidly. Structurally, China's economy relies heavily on exports. 40% of its finished industrial goods must be exported, with a significant portion destined for the US. 40% of these exports are sold directly or indirectly to American markets. This means 16% of China's industrial output depends on the US. Moreover, trade with the US is highly profitable, accounting for roughly 50% of gross profit for Chinese industrial firms. Without this revenue, China's industrial sector would face catastrophic collapse. Most critically, the current Chinese government is not the reform-driven administration of the past. It lacks any genuine commitment to economic progress. Industrial civilization and authoritarian rule are inherently incompatible, coexisting at most for a single generation before clashing. Industrial civilization requires a free and equitable market, which fundamentally conflicts with authoritarian control. As industrial society matures, citizens demand rights, reforms, and political representation, demands the Chinese regime cannot accept. Since 2015, the regime has shifted away from fostering economic growth, embracing a deliberate policy of stagnation. Through measures like real estate destocking, rigid environmental crackdowns, vilification of private enterprises, state media's allegiance to the party, 3 years of stringent lockdowns, and community grid enforcement, it has systematically eroded private wealth, suppressed domestic industry, and tightened political control. This was intended to preemptively neutralize the industrial civilization threatening the regime's revival, denying it the chance to grow. A decade of this intentional stagnation has left China's economy frail and unprepared for an economic confrontation. Thus, while the Chinese government may appear powerful, controlling vast resources, it has lost the capacity for societal mobilization. It can no longer rally its people to confront a crisis. The government avoids acknowledging the economy's perilous state, as doing so would invite overwhelming public scrutiny and a reckoning over its decade-long stagnation policies. Its remaining strength lies in social suppression, tightly controlled citizens, silencing speech, stifling thought, restricting communication, blocking investments, and preventing wealth creation. The plan was to activate a comprehensive social suppression model post-economic collapse to ensure the regime's survival. However, this U.S.-China conflict erupted unexpectedly, catching the regime off guard. Implementing the suppression model requires years of preparation, at least 4 or 5, even if expedited. The sudden outbreak of this economic clash, like a stroke of blind luck, coincided with China's moment of greatest economic and political vulnerability, leaving the government in a profoundly awkward position with no effective countermeasures. Economic mobilization such as tax relief for private firms, enhanced citizen welfare, or relaxed administrative controls contradicts the regime's core aim of suppressing industrial civilization to preserve its rule. These measures are unthinkable, as their adoption would signify the failure of the past decade's stagnation policies. This would embolden the suppressed industrial sector to demand political power, triggering a political reckoning the regime cannot endure. Consequently, the regime is wholly unprepared to address this U.S.-China showdown. No viable measures can be implemented. In this brutal conflict, empty rhetoric is futile. Spreading falsehoods such as claims that Trump has capitulated is absurd and will only hasten the economy's collapse. Turning to China's misjudgment of the U.S., its gravest error was underestimating the Trump administration's determination to disrupt the status quo. The post-World War II global economic order was not inevitable. It requires maintenance and sacrifice. That burden has been borne solely by the United States. Since the industrial era, humanity has faced a recurring economic crisis. Industrial capacity has outpaced purchasing power, making insufficient demand a persistent challenge. This fueled colonial wars and the devastating conflicts of World War I and World War II. Post-World War II, the U.S. established the Bretton Woods system, tying the dollar to gold and exporting purchasing power globally. This persisted until the 1970s, when U.S. gold reserves were nearly depleted, halting its ability to sustain global demand. The world economy sank into stagflation. In the 1980s, President Reagan introduced debt-backed money printing, linking the dollar's credibility to U.S. national credit. By issuing treasury bonds, the U.S. continued to export dollars and purchasing power worldwide. American manufacturing was outsourced to Southeast Asia, fostering the Asian tigers and later concentrated in China, propelling it to become the world's leading basic manufacturing hub. Even after China's 2015 shift to intentional stagnation, it retained much of its foundation. From the 1950s to the 2020s, 70 years of relative global peace and prosperity without major upheavals, and a third world war was sustained by US dollar exports. This model, however, is unsustainable and costly. Between the 1950s and the 1970s, the US nearly exhausted its gold reserves, forcing a shift to debt-backed printing. From the 1970s to the 2020s, US national debt surged from near zero to $36 trillion, a level that cannot be sustained. The US government now struggles to cover interest payments, with 20% of monthly federal revenue consumed by debt servicing. Trump's 2016 election victory reflected the collapse of this American model. While exporting dollars and industries enriched Wall Street, it hollowed out domestic industry. The Rust Belt faced bankruptcy and declining safety, leaving the working class in despair and middle-class families bankrupt. Finance and the tech industries alone could not support 340 million people. Public resentment grew, awaiting an outlet. Trump capitalized on this demand, which propelled his rise. Upon taking office in 2016, Trump initiated trade talks with China, visiting in 2017 to negotiate a new trade deal to rebalance U.S.-China trade and revive American manufacturing. The visit failed. As globalization's primary beneficiary, China had no incentive to alter the status quo. In early 2018, shocked by China's constitutional amendments reversing progress, Trump launched the trade war, imposing 20% tariffs on Chinese exports via Section 301. During Trump's first term, manufacturing began returning to the US, but the challenges persisted. In 2020, he lost to Biden, whose left-leaning policies and extreme environmental regulations halted manufacturing's revival. New factories, oil fields, and pipelines were blocked for environmental reasons, stifling progress. Biden's policies even targeted agriculture, restricting fertilizers, pesticides, and diesel machinery as insufficiently green, causing agricultural costs to rise over 30% in 4 years. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters evaded US tariffs through transshipment, using rudimentary packaging plants in Southeast Asia and Latin America to relabel goods as local exports, bypassing the 20% tariff. In November 2024, Trump won a decisive re-election. Now he requires no further caution. Unlike his isolated first term, he is now backed by a cohesive group of allies, united in dismantling the 70-year globalization framework, halting U.S. purchasing power exports, and rebuilding American manufacturing. Their resolve is unwavering, and obstacles will be decisively removed. Critically, this group views China uniformly. As globalization's greatest beneficiary, China is greedy, taking without contributing. Even as the world's second-largest economy, it shirks global responsibilities. They believe China has no place in the new global economic order and must be neutralized before it grows stronger. Trump's new cabinet is staunchly anti-China. Secretary of State, a Trade Representative, and a Treasury Secretary, each more resolute than the last. By comparison, Trump appears moderate. In this context, the trade war, once ignited, will not subside. It is a fight to the end. Ironically, China fails to grasp the severity of this conflict. State media propagates narratives of Trump's surrender or U.S. internal discord. These falsehoods amuse Chinese citizens who imagine Americans will soon capitulate, eliminate tariffs, and beg for Chinese goods. In reality, the U.S. feels minimal impact from the tariff war. Biden's 4 years of misguided policies have given Trump's administration significant flexibility. Repealing Biden's regulations could reduce agricultural costs by 30%. Lifting energy production bans has lowered crude oil prices from $75 to around $60 per barrel. By undoing Biden's errors, Trump's administration can stabilize agricultural and energy prices, effectively controlling inflation. With this foundation, the U.S. will not waver in the tariff conflict. Meanwhile, China's understanding of the U.S. is profoundly lacking. The CCP's leadership cannot comprehend why the U.S. avoids inflation or the Trump administration's determination to reshape global rules. Since April 2nd, when the U.S. challenged the world alone, China's sole response has been reciprocal tariffs. By April 9th, the U.S. shifted to dominance, while other nations began negotiating new rules with America. These rules, however they take shape, will explicitly exclude China. From April 9th to now, beyond the rhetoric and minor tariff increases, China has offered no substantive countermeasures. It is effectively resigned to defeat. If this continues, the likelihood of China's economy collapsing within the year approaches certainty. In this fragile state, corporate bankruptcies will surge, unemployment will sweep the nation, debt defaults will proliferate, public safety will deteriorate, and governance will collapse. At such a moment, even unchecked money printing by the central bank cannot avert collapse. The financial system, crippled by the regime's interference, is too dysfunctional to deliver funds to those in need. My perspective is that a brief, intense crisis is preferable to prolonged suffering. For the Chinese people, the social unrest sparked by economic collapse is an inevitable reckoning. Only through such turmoil can they reflect and, from the ruins of brief chaos, build a new order. This may be the true turning point for a nation burdened by CCP's decay. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.